Hello everyone, welcome to part 12 of my tutorial series about recreating the Apple Fitness Plus interface using React and advanced CSS techniques. We've gotten so much done and it's looking really good. In this part, I'm going to share one of my favorite CSS techniques for scaling a container to the size of its contents without knowing the size of its contents in advance. This usually requires some JavaScript, some React, but not today. Today we're going to scale dynamically and responsively using this one cool trick. So let's get after it. Okay, let's go back over to our app.tsx. Let's get this CSS off to the side. And our interval timer is right here and it's working perfectly. Next thing we want to do is set this interval, this intensity message. Right now it says all out, but it needs to be dynamic. We happen to have a variable for that already set up. That variable is intensity message, so we just grab the intensity message. We could put this into a component. It's not really going to end up being necessary. It's a little overkill, and we could do it. There you can see it already changed to hard, which is what the interval is at this point in the project. Wonderful. So we're going to talk about how to hide and show the individual elements of the sprint group, but we don't want to just fade them in and out like we did with the info box. We want them to collapse away and expand dynamically to whatever content is in there. Right now you can see that hard doesn't exceed the bounds of the info box, but at one point we're going to set the intensity message to be moderate, and we could set it to go as hard as you can. We could go crazy with how long that is. So we don't want our box to pop and change shape unattractively. We want to handle that dynamically. So to achieve that, we're going to use a CSS Grid trick. Let's put the terminal away so we have a little more space to work. And first thing we're going to do is a little bit of dynamic class names, as we've been doing, to this sprint group, to the interval timer, and to the intensity. To do that, we actually want to do a little bit of nesting. Let's start by taking the interval timer and wrapping that in a div. And let's wrap the intensity message in a div as well. I'll explain why in a bit. Okay, so now about that dynamic. We actually want to wrap this in another div. We're going to call this one auto hide, auto size. And we'll put our entire nested object inside there. Beautiful. Now auto size needs to go down around here as well. But we don't want it to just be constantly called auto size. It needs to be dynamic. So this first one is the timer visible? If the timer is visible, the auto size will open up. For the other one, we want is the intensity interval visible? And that will add the open. So when the JSON gets to a point where we open these up, it'll add the word open to these auto sizes. So let's define what and how auto size works. This trick uses 4 styles. So the first one is dot auto size. And we're going to say this is display grid. We're going to set the grid template columns to 0 FR. We're going to set the grid template rows to 0 FR. Unlike just about anything else in CSS, you can dynamically scale from 0 to the dynamically calculated size of the div using grids. So we're going to set the transition here, 0.5 seconds, and we'll say ease. Okay. So now it's going to set the grid template of columns and rows to 0, which is empty, small, invisible. But now, when we put to open, we set the grid template columns to 1 FR, which is going to fit the content. And we're going to do the same with the grid template columns, or rows. Now, the last two classes have to do with those nested divs. So we're going to say dot auto size as the immediate div below, not the nested divs. That makes this extensible. If we were to put a div within that div, which we have done, it would react accordingly. And this one is going to say opacity 0. If the auto size isn't open, we don't want this to be visible. We want the overflow to be hidden. It is going to scale to the size of its parent, and anything outside of that will be hidden. That's important. And we're going to transition this one as well. 0.5 seconds. Ease, you might want to variabilize that transition time to the root, to here, or we can keep it independent. So now dot auto size dot open div, and that's going to be an opacity of 1. So we save this and we save this, it should animate onto and off the screen dynamically as it's set. Let's refresh our page and see that working. Hello everyone, and welcome to this simulated 90 seconds. So at around 10 seconds, it's going to put the info box on the screen with a opacity transition. In a second here, he's going to say, that won't get me in. The timers and the intervals, and those should show. Okay, time for our first interaction. Let's put 25 seconds on the clock. Starting easy, and go. Did you see that? That's something that Apple does as well with their Apple Fitness Plus. They put it on the screen and then take it off the screen. And what's going to happen is when it's off the screen, they never change the intensity when it's on the screen. They always hide the intensity from easy, for example, change it while it's invisible to hard, moderate, all out, whatever, and then put it back on the screen. And by doing that transition, when the next intensity level comes up, the box will grow or shrink accordingly to the content that's within it. So let's watch that happen. Take it to hard. If I was a real person, this would be killing me. Okay, now back to easy, nice and slow. Almost done, full speed. Do you see how smoothly that happened? The box grew to accommodate the word moderate, and it will shrink again when moderate goes away. Also, how cool is that little clock turning right there? Very nice. Great work. All right, on your feet. Okay, that wasn't so bad, but now we're going to go all out. Why? Let's put 10 seconds. Okay, so this is just working great. It's doing a lot of complex things, lots of great fit and finish. There's one more thing we need to build in. So within the sprint group, let's create a line at the bottom. So here's our sprint group. And within our sprint group at the bottom, let's create dot sprint line. We could do this with a border, but then we have to fight the padding, and that gets complicated. We're just going to fight the padding using some styles on here. So there's sprint line. So we're going to say dot sprint line. Sprint line is going to be given a position of absolute. It's going to be set to the bottom, 0. Let's set the background to white. And let's set the width, or the width to 100%. And of course, we haven't given it any height. So let's give it a height. Let's call it 3 pixels. There it is. Now, the sprint group needs a position of relative so that that isn't being relative to the parent. Now, because the sprint group has some padding on it, this is going to, of 1 rem, this is going to stick like that. We don't want that. So instead of width of 100%, we're going to actually set the left, this is a fun trick, to -1 rem. And we're going to set the right to -1 rem. That snaps it into place. That's looking pretty good. Now, we can tell by looking that that is not the same color as here. So I think that is probably white with, we'll call it 30%. Much better. Now, this is only visible, though, when the sprint group is open. So copy that and put .open above it. Sprint group .open is probably more specific and better. And we'll set the background of the open version, this back above. No what? Take out all the redundant classes or styles. And we'll set this opacity here to 0. And this one to an even 0.3, just for aesthetics. So now it will only appear when one or the other of those is open. And then we'll transition away. It won't transition away. It should transition away in 0.5 seconds and ease into an out of position. Now, it's a little close to the bottom. So what I want to do is have the sprint group get a little bit of bottom padding. Call it 0.5 rem. That looks good, but that padding is going to be there whether or not the group is open, and we don't want that. So I'm going to set the transition. Again, probably should variabilize these to 0.5 seconds and ease. I'm going to copy that and just take out the redundant stuff and set this to initially 0 rem. And then when it's open, it'll add that padding. So let's see what that looks like in motion after this 10-second sprint. Seconds on the clock. That way we can do a bit more interactivity without having to rewind the video. All out, ready, go. Almost done. One more. Great work, and shut it down. If you've done the burn bar part of the tutorial, you should be seeing that progress showing up. Okay, did you see how the line came and went dynamically? It looked fantastic. Did you notice the problem? The intensity, it was line wrapping as the animation happened, and we don't want that. So let's go here and say .intensity. Actually, I can't think of anything in the entire info box that should line wrap. So let's go info box, H1, and we're going to say white space equals no wrap. And then I actually think we already have an info box H1 somewhere. We do. So I'm going to take this, cut that, go find the other one, and put it there. Got to keep your classes tidy. All right, so let's clean up this document. Take out these extra spaces. Align everything. F1, post CSS sorting. What a wonderful looking file. And so now we are pretty much done. Are your wheels turning as much as mine were when I learned this technique? Think of all the applications for this cool grid trick. I mean, expanding forms, modifying pages, it's fantastic. I use it all the time. Now let's take a moment and look at what we've done. How close are we? How great is this project looking? Think of all the things you've learned. Think about all the techniques that are on display here. How great is that? The next part of this series is the last part. We're going to come in and do last touches, a little bit more fit and finish, and then we're going to be done. Isn't that awesome? Thanks for sticking around so long. As usual, leave your questions in the comments. I'll answer as many as I can. Share your techniques. As we get closer and closer to the finish line, I'm sure you're getting more and more ideas about how I might have done things differently or better. I want to hear those things so that I can learn and grow from your knowledge as much as I'm trying to share the knowledge that I've gained along the way. So Thanks for sticking around. I'll see you next time.